Back to the Wall Street Journal piece, in which they say the base feels betrayed. Some of the base feels betrayed. Again, this is anecdotal. It's not scientific. I haven't seen polling on it yet. But overwhelmingly, the polling that I have seen about dealing with Iran and Iran having a nuke, overwhelmingly the country, even Democrats, independents, and certainly most Republicans overwhelmingly know Iran cannot have a nuke. They can't. It's not even a discussion. It's an 80-20 issue. That much we know. Now, where it starts to get muddy and cloudy is striking Iran. And yes, I understand. There is no one who has an appetite for war. Most people don't. John Bolton does. Lindsey Graham does. Folks, I am not a war hawk. Let me say it again. I told you last week, and I mean it still. I believe what Eisenhower warned about. Post-World War II, beware the military-industrial complex. That's a thing. That's real. And yes, I believe people like Lindsey Graham have never, ever, ever missed out on an opportunity to call for war. I am mindful, by the way, that John Bolton is thrilled with what happened over the weekend. That gives me pause. I won't lie. Nothing coming out of John Bolton's mouth. And you know how ugly it was when he left Trump's first term. And do you know why John Bolton left Trump's first term? Because Bolton was constantly beating the drums of war, and Trump was trying to figure a way out. But this is not static. Situations change. Israel is our closest ally, and Iran cannot have a nuke, and everybody understands that Iran means us harm. This is, and it's not a perfect analogy, as I wrote last week and I continue to write about today at the Haram Society, the closest analogy that I can draw to what this is, and it's not a perfect one, and please, you historians, I'm not looking to make perfect historical analogies. But this is like the Cuban Missile Crisis. Donald Trump, much like Kennedy, understands we can't tolerate a nation hostile to us that has the power to annihilate us. Can't tolerate it. And we know what Barack Obama and Joe Biden did to enable Iran. And the Cuban Missile Crisis was just 90 miles away off our shores. Iran's threat is just mere miles, really, from Israel, which is the speed bump to us. We are the great Satan. There is no doubt they want not just death to Israel, but death to us. And I have long warned, and I hope everybody's very, very clear about this. And I was telling my son about this yesterday. Islamo-supremacists are all about two things: conversion or kill you if you don't convert. And Islamists with nukes ought to be a terrifying proposition to most of us, not just Israel. And I say again to people who are constantly obsessed with this being about Israel, I ask you to defend Iran. I want to hear a full-throated defense of Iran. And you'll note that all of these people that are chirping now from supposedly our side about this strike on Iran and how unconstitutional it is, I have never heard them defend Iran. I've never heard them explain why Iran is not a threat. I've never heard them explain why Islamo-supremacy is not a problem for the West. And not just Israel, all of the West. Or any moderate Muslim nation, by the way. And have you noticed how quiet all of the more moderate Muslim neighbors are? There's a reason. If the base feels betrayed, they'll be more apathetic during the midterms, and it will be his own undoing, said Thomas Massey, who Trump pledged to primary over the weekend. Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote on X, "Every time America is on the verge of greatness, we get involved in another foreign war. This is not our fight." Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been a guest on this show a couple of times, as you know, and if she were here today, I would say, explain to me why it's not our fight. That's the first question I'd ask her, and if we get her back, I will ask her. Explain why Iran being nuked is not our fight. Nuked up. What makes that not our fight? Israel is an ally. They are a strategic ally, and we have 40,000 men and women stationed all over the Middle East alone. Military bases, installments, and just men and women and families who live there on bases and installments. And this new... And I think inorganic, I think it's just chaos for the sake of stirring chaos. This new wing of influencers in our midst who are supposedly pro-Trump but have now turned on him because he struck Iran. I don't quite know the hearts and minds of every one of them, but by and large, the vast majority of them, you understand the only way they get clicks and downloads and listens is to be at all times counterculture to whatever's going on. At all times. There's no acknowledgement of the threat and the danger of Islamism. Nuclear Islamism. There's no acknowledgement of it at all. And I want you to be very, very clear when you listen to these people who say we're being dragged into a foreign war by Israel. They never talk about Islamofascism with nukes. Never. They just talk about Israel. And I don't know what drives it, but it's an uncomfortable flirting, I'll just say, with anti-Semitism, in my opinion. This situation transcends Israel, as I wrote today. This is about safeguarding regional and global stability. It's about preventing a nuclear Iran from dominating the region and extorting the world. October 7th and that tragedy in Israel and the immense cost of dismantling Iran's terror network are direct consequences of the Biden, that was what Sarah Palin called him, Obama-Biden administrations. 16 of the last 20 years have been policies that have emboldened and strengthened Iran. This was an absolute blistering of not just Iran, it was a blistering, a dismantling, a nuking of the Obama legacy, which built Iran to this point that Donald Trump, as usual, has to come in and clean up. President Trump has stepped up where others have faltered, and he has averted global catastrophe as far as I'm concerned. This is a moment of huge historical significance. And I know that this same group of nattering nabob types are now trumpeting what Trump said on Truth Social about regime change yesterday. I hear you. I understand. And so for you people that think he's calling for regime change, I just ask you again, what have we learned about Donald Trump? And why all of a sudden have all of these people who were once pro-Trump and enthusiastic about Trump, why have they all decided that they don't know how to speak Trump anymore? Well, because it's not good for the business model. Donald Trump is not always to be taken literally. All right? Now, Iran just found out he's to be taken literally. When he says something, he means it. But when Trump gets on social media and winks and says things like, and here's the quote, it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be regime change? Responding to concerns that the U.S. was entering another war abroad, J.D. Vance and other said Americans are understandably exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. In fact, Pete Hegseth over there at the Pentagon addressed this yesterday, that this is not open-ended. It is not about regime change. Let's go to 2602 here, Paul, if we could. Secretary of Defense Hegseth yesterday morning.
As the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation.
Now, what do we know about Iran? So again, that's Hegseth doubling down on this message again. This is focused. This was precise. They didn't target oil fields. They didn't target populations. They targeted their nuclear installments. This was a very specific, incredibly executed, very precise strike that was meant to be limited in its focus, and it was a masterclass in military precision, operational secrecy, and most of all, diversion. They were sending flights to Guam. People were like, what the hell? There is no sign that Iran had any clue this was coming. And as such, fatalities, I don't know about fatalities in Iran, but there wasn't a single one involved with American or allied forces. This was devastatingly effective. By all metrics, it was a win, and it was targeted, it was focused, it is not limitless, as long as Iran decides not to get uppity and start attacking our installations, or some 40,000 of our men and women who are installed there in the Middle East. If they do, then we will respond. They shouldn't. That would be really stupid. They're talking about closing the Straits of Hormuz. That would be really stupid, too. But all the more reason, by the way, we should be energy efficient and energy dominant and making our own energy here. Were we drilling all along, we wouldn't need to worry about the Straits of Hormuz and the oil market, which right now hasn't seemed to think that we're in some kind of international calamity because the oil market's pretty much holding. But as I said to my son yesterday, and I'll say to you, Donald Trump on Truth Social saying, why wouldn't there be regime change, is not him saying we're going to go in and change and topple the regime. He's telling, if the intelligence is to be believed, some 80% of the Iranian population does not want to live under Islamofascism. Some 80% of the Iranian population, as I'm to understand it, from people that I trust and believe, they're moderates who hate living under this fascistic, religious, totalitarian government. And so Donald Trump is winking at them. He's saying, listen, we've got these people that you're afraid of and you've been living under this oppressive regime. We've got them on the ropes. Now might be the time for regime change. He's winking. He's winking at them. Like he winks when he says Canada ought to be the 51st state. Or like he says we ought to consider buying Greenland. He says stuff like that to get conversations going. He says stuff like that because he knows all the world watches him on social media. He's not ushering in regime change. He's encouraging the Iranians. Hey, we got your back. Go at it. And I think most Trump voters, if they're sincere, understand that about Trump. You don't take everything he says as literal. Sometimes he's just trying to stir the pot, and this is one of those instances. I don't like dishonesty, including people on our side.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.